Hi, I'm Quincas and I'm a synth DIY guy. Welcome to your channel for new technologies, modular synthesizers, and synthesizer do-it-yourself applied to music and sound design. I'm here in beautiful Tepoztlán, Mexico, enjoying a family retreat for the end of the year, and of course, being the nerd that I am, I couldn't resist bringing some gear and doing a video here. And today, we're gonna take a deep look at the Morph 4 by Joranalogue, which is a really cool and unique module. I've had it for a little while now, so I've had a chance to really experiment and play with it. So I'm very excited to share with you people what all this module can do. It's named a dimensional modulation array. When you look at the panel, you see that you have 4 channels labeled A, B, C, and D. Each of the 4 channels has knob control, which are labeled as level, position, and span. You also have a whole slew of inputs over here, main inputs for each one of the 4 channels. So here's the +5. It's labeled that way because it's normaled to +5 volts here, and you'll see why that's useful very soon. And then you have modulation inputs for each one of the 4 channels here. And these are actually normaled to the Morph section over here, which we'll see in a minute as well. You also have position inputs for all 4 channels, and you have span inputs for all 4 channels. So basically everything that has a manual control also has a CV control. You have the individual outputs for each channel over here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's it for the middle block here. Now on the side we have 2 mixed outputs, which are A plus B and C plus D, which is handy for some stereo modulation ideas that you may have. There's also an add and an average output. These are mixes of the 4 channels, and they're at different levels. The average output is a little bit softer in case you're mixing hot signals here and the add output turns out to be too hot, and you can use the average output. There's also a minimum and a maximum output, which can also be used very creatively. Each will output only the minimum or the maximum voltages that are generated by the module, by the mix of all 4 channels. But what is it? What is the Morph 4? In simple terms, it is a Quad VCA. So right there, it's already super useful because it's a Quad VCA with mixing functions, so you can use it just as that if you like, right? On a small system like this, to have 4 really nice linear VCAs with very clean sound and some different mixing options here can be very useful. But what makes it very special is the Morph section over here. In fact, that's why the module is even called Morph 4. So let's have a look at what the Morph does. Basically, it creates a voltage lump, let's call it like that, that can move from left to right. And this is an imaginary physical position kind of an idea, but it matches the position and span controls over here. These are basically related to the Morph. So if we put the channels in different positions, so these 2 kind of hard, soft left, and these 2 kind of hard and soft right, when I move the Morph button, these LEDs indicate which of the channels are getting that Morph voltage. So we're sweeping that voltage lump across the field, the imaginary field where we're positioning the channels. And not only do you see it light up over here, the LED that says A, you also see the activity, the voltage activity indicated on the LED for the A channel, and then the B channel, and the C channel, and the D channel. Now, this will be fun to watch with Data's voltage monitor. So why don't I plug each output to a channel of the data over there so that we can monitor exactly what's going on with those voltages. You can see my channel 1 here, which is channel A. You can see how that voltage is at 5 volts right now. Now, as I morph it, that voltage goes down, and now we get it on channel B, and the 5 volts are super precise. And then as I keep sweeping, that goes down now, and now our channel C, 3 on data, starts going up, right? And it goes up to 5 volts, and it starts coming back down again. And then we see the yellow now, which is 4 on data and D on the Morph. also here's 5 volts right there. So if I sweep them quickly, you can see those lumps, how they happen in order. See? Let me go back and forth. Now there is a Morph modulation input over here with its attenuverter. Let's use the filter 8 as an LFO, and we'll plug that in to that Morph modulation input. Take one of the outputs here, and now we can see how we're automating. Right, see? It goes back and forth. You see those peaks happen on the voltage monitor, and you can also observe that behavior happen over here on the LEDs of the Morph 4 itself, right? Both the upper display. Now I can make the spread even wider, and that'll make them even more visible right there. See? Very cool. I can make it faster. Right. Now, what's the span control for? You might be asking. Well, as you see that triangle that's being described there, the span changes the base of the triangle. So you can have it where each channel responds to a very narrow portion of the Morph signal that's coming in, and therefore gives you this very sort of isosceles triangle with a narrow base, right? And so if I turn the span on all 4 channels to the left, you can see how, let's make this a little slower again. See how those little triangles are very narrow, right? Might be too small to really see well, but now if I turn the span all the way towards the right, now you can see how the triangles are way wider, right? So that means that they actually bleed into each other. So if you're using this, for example, as a quadraphonic panner, which is one of the very cool uses you can use it for, you can have it so that the sound goes discretely to each speaker without actually crossing over, right? It just sounds on one and then the other and then the other and then the other. Or you can have them blend into each other so that it feels like the sound is actually moving around the sound field. So that's one of the possible uses for that span control. And if you put it in the middle, you can see that it still get a bit of crossfade there. Well, why don't we have a look in oscilloscope mode, right? So you see yellow, red, blue, and green alternating, right? And positive only. If I make this faster, like this, you can kind of see now how they're alternating, right? Now if I make these spans all very narrow, you get these pointy, narrow little triangles. Why don't we do a little bit of patching to see what kinds of things we can do, right? I've already recorded a few patch ideas, but I want to walk you through some of them in real time here, so really wrap our heads around what this module is doing. So one thing that you can do, for example, is just use it as a 4-way crossfader between different sound sources or modulation sources. So for sound sources, one thing we can try right now is take the Generate 3. Okay, let me turn off the volume here. We can take the Generate 3, which has 5 outputs, and we'll use 4 of those outputs, the fundamental, even, odd, and core, to send to the inputs. So instead of that 5 volts that's normaled in there, we will now get a different waveform output out of the Generate 3. So I've got fundamental, even, odd, and core. The core being a triangle 1 octave below the other outputs. The full output would be a mix of the 3 waveform outputs. We don't need that right now yet. Okay, so I've got all of these plugged in. Let's take the outputs, and why not also pan them, right? So I'm going to send them to 4 separate inputs of my hex mix over here, and let's pan these. So same kind of idea, so hard and soft left, soft and hard right, turn on the channels. Volumes seem to be fairly well matched. Oh yeah, and the level controls here are also really good for when you're mixing. When you're using all 4 channels, you can control the individual levels right here. Now let's turn on our sound. Let's make it slower here and pan the positions. Let's reduce a little bit of the incoming morph modulation voltage so that it doesn't go past. So these are the four outputs of Generate 3. Now they still sound sort of discrete, so if I open the span more, they start bleeding into each other. It becomes more of a crossfading, right? So let's make that even slower. And here we have, not only are we morphing between the waveforms, but we're also distributing them across the stereo field. Alright. To change that into more of a mono sound, all I have to do is bring these back to center. And now it's really mostly just a waveform morphing, right? Very nice. This is actually a very cool sound to use as a drone. Let's make it fast. We make it audio rate even. So now this is kind of a quad amplitude modulation kind of effect. And it can be very interesting if you use it in stereo too. Alright. And even just playing with these 2 coarse tune knobs here. Ah, yeah, rock and roll, baby. Alright, now we can change the spans and get different effects too. You have some high, some low. So very cool. Now I can use this as modulation too. So let's turn this down again. And what if we try now? We'll use the Generate 3 in low mode, so it's an LFO. And now we have those shapes acting as LFOs rather than oscillations. And what we can do is create a triangle wave with the contour 1 in audio rate here. And we can send it the mixed output, so the added output of the Morph 4 into its rate input here. So we'll be modulating the frequency of our contour 1, which is acting as an oscillator. And why don't I turn off the 4 channels we were using before and use a 5th channel just to be practical and get that output out of contour 1. We'll make sure that 5th channel is panned to center and turn it on. So now as we morph through the different modulation sources, and let's do that in LFO rate. That's pretty cool. Now maybe this is too similar. So instead of using 4 outputs from the Generate 3, we can try a few different things, right? So I have a Kermit also over here, which is another modulation source. And why don't we take, let's see how I'll set it up. We'll set up 1 to be an LFO, 2 to be a audio rate oscillator, 3 to be a smooth random, and 4 to be a stepped random. So these are now different enough that we can really differentiate. So now we're morphing between 4 different modulation sources, right? And I'm still using an LFO, so it's just going back and forth. Of course, if you use a sequencer, for example, you can be more meticulous, more deliberate about the order in which you want these channels to appear. Or you can just change the positions. I mean, the positions are not necessarily meant to be set up in order like that, in a physically logical spanning order. You can actually have them all in the center too. And then you get the sum of all of the modulation sources only when the morphing passes through the center position. Okay. Let's try these two panned hard and these two a little softer. And you can see now that the LEDs are not lighting up in order anymore. Right. So already right here we have a very cool kind of chaotic patch going. Right. And of course, if I bring all these levels down, we get that steady pitch again, right? And I can just turn one on, and then whenever the morph hits that, you get that modulation and no other. That seems to be the smooth random. Let's turn on the stepped random now. There we go. Of course, if I consider that voltage range to be too wide, I can make it smaller by turning the level pot a little bit down. Let's turn on this, what is an LFO? Or is that audio rate? Oh, yeah, that's audio rate. This is the actual LFO. I think I need more amplitude out of these outputs here. Yeah, there we go. Very cool. Let's make the LFO faster. Very nice. Interesting sounds. Higher pitch here on the contour. And audio rate modulation of the morph. Things start getting noisier, gnarlier. And I'm not even modulating the pitch there, right? Well, I am modulating the pitch, but I'm not moving that center pitch. I'm only sending non-tonal modulations to it. Super fun. Now you can also modulate these guys, right? Positions and spans and so on and so forth. So how about we modulate those with the Kermit? So we'll remove these Kermit outputs, and we'll use the Generate 3 again as our main modulation source. Plug those in. And now we'll use the signals from the Kermit to modulate some of the spans and some of the position parameters on the Morph 4. And now things get even more chaotic. What have we got here? B is an oscillator, right? Maybe we want that B to be an LFO right now. Make it an LFO, but we'll change that waveform a bit. Like a step ladder. And we'll make them at different speeds. There we go. Pretty cool, right? Cosmic birds. Very nice. Now here's something interesting that I just thought to do. Instead of taking that mixed, we can take only outputs A and B mixed to modulate that rate input, and which is normal to the other rate input, so these are actually up and down are going together. But once I plug something into the other rate input, then they're independent. So now we have A and B mix modulating the rise of the contour, and C and D modulating the fall. And that gives us even more different kinds of sounds. It gets us away from that triangle and makes waveforms that go all the way from a rising ramp to a falling ramp going through the triangle. Okay, why don't we take that max output, or the mixed, the add, and we'll modulate our Generate 3, which is our source of modulations. Modulate that. With the output of the Morph 4. So yeah. Things are getting rather crazy. So this is pretty much how the module works. Now as far as uses for it, I mean, it's a brand new idea, so I'm sure I haven't thought of everything that can be done with it. I know there's a video by DivKit that shows quite a few ideas. I definitely recommend you go check that out. And yeah, stay tuned. I'm going to show you a few of the different patches and ideas that I've already made with this module. And I hope you liked them. I hope you liked the video. If you did, remember to please hit like, subscribe to the channel, maybe join my Patreon, pitch in, and stay noisy. So here's a patch I liked so much that I made an album with it called Morph 4. It's likely to be the first album ever made with the Morph 4. Let me try to explain it in as simple way as I can. So the instrument, I'm using it as a controller. It's connected via USB to the FH2 here from Expert Sleepers, which is generating 4 MPE voices. The pitches of each voice are going to 4 different oscillators. So we have the 2 piston Hondas and my 2 Erica Synths VCO2 modules down here. Let me just angle the camera so you can see it. Here's the Klein Fusion system. I'm using the 2 VCOs. So those are my 4 voices. I'm not actually sending them to any filters or anything. I'm relying on their raw sound. I have the wavetable set pretty low, so not too many harmonics. And also the VCOs, I'm using the triangle waves with a little bit of tube crunch to them, all going into the inputs of Morph 4. right? The main signal inputs, which are used for audio or CV. Now, the outputs of each of the 4 channels of Morph 4 are going into Mordex data here, just so I can monitor what's going on. And then from data, they're going into 4 channels of my hex mix here. And I have a panning scheme where the first channel is hard left, the second channel is a soft left, third channel is a soft right, and the fourth channel a hard right. So basically I'm creating panorama. I would have liked to do it quadrophonically, but I don't have a quadraphonic setup, and also to make a video quadraphonic would be quite a challenge. I'd have to use some conversion to ambisonics or something like that. Now, the 4MS quad clock distributor is generating 3 clocks. One of them is triggering my contour 1 module, which is over here on my Joranalogue rack. That's generating a rising and falling ramp that are going into the Morph input on the quad 4. And as you can see on the LEDs here, what it's doing, it's sweeping through the 4 voices here. And I can set my positions and span to do different interesting kind of minimalistic things with the 4 voices. The position inputs here are connected to 4 outputs of my filter 8, which I'm using as a quadrature low frequency oscillator. The mixed outputs of Morph 4, A and B, is going to the left side of my Roland Demora delay, and C and D are going to the right side of my Roland Demora delay. The Demora is then connected to the moon phase filter, which is a stereo filter, just to give it a little character, and left and right are going back into a channel of the hex mix here. And also the add output, which is a mix of all 4 channels, is going into a wave folder, which is going into its own channel, heavily processed with spring reverb. So this is something I just bring in on occasion by turning up the wave folder here. And the span inputs are all connected to my Kermit module, which is generating 4 smooth random voltages. That's going to randomize the span or the base of the triangle that's being generated by the Morph parameter here. I'm also using the generate 3 as an LFO to control the speed of the filter 8, which in turn controls the positions of the 4 voices as they go through the Morph 4. So without further ado, let's have a listen to what this sounds like. There's the delay there. So any chord that I play here, 4-note chord, like this for example. This is a shape for a minor 7th chord. So as you see the LED here, it's sweeping through those 4 notes in stereo. Now one thing that I can do that's really fun is just manually control the span, and that'll emphasize different notes within the chord by just making them longer. So that alone is a nice performance technique. You can play around with just 1 chord for a while. Another thing you can do is play around with the rhythm by changing the position of the 4 voices. And that can even change the order in which they appear. They don't have to be in order from left to right. You can put any channel in any position you would like. And we can combine both things. Sometimes changing the chord is nice, so let's go up a whole step here. If I press it again, it'll change which voice is playing which note, right? make them very short by having the span all the way low. And so far I'm only modulating these parameters manually, right? Now as I turn the amplitude up on my 4 channels of the Kermit, we're gonna start getting random modulation of the 4 spans. So let's do that. Let's make this slower. And by changing the curve of my contour 1 here, I also change the speed of the sweep. I'm going to change the subdivision here on the clock. Okay, we'll change the positions now again. So as you can hear and see on the LEDs, our spans are now randomly changing their width. Now as I turn up the resonance on my filter 8 here, it'll start acting as an LFO and change the positions. So each output of the LFO is going to affect the position. So that's a really cool progression, right? You can go from one chord, playing it with the rhythms by changing the positions, emphasize some different notes by turning up the span. Then you can start randomizing the span and eventually randomize the position and play around with different chords. You can play around with the curve of the contour 1 here. It's just such a nice patch. Such a nice patch that I made a 25-minute piece that ended up becoming a record. Here's that folder. Whenever I want to, I just turn up the fold parameter. And this is fold 6, by the way, which is also new by Joranalogue. One cool thing I like to do is leave the filter rate in audio rate with low resonance. And as I raise the resonance, it does audio rate modulation of all 4 position parameters, which is very interesting stereo kind of amplitude modulation kind of a thing. Right, and that's another thing that I can sort of just dial in as a detail, just as like the wave folder. Just create some gnarly glitchiness to go along with the piece. Go back to LFO. And get that position variation happening there. And then turn the resonance down, put an audio rate, and that's gone. And now our positions are being respected again. And I can also dial back the amplitude on the Kermit channels. And we're back to manual. So if you like this patch, go to my Bandcamp and download the album. It's a nice meditation, 25 minutes of very calming, minimalistic, ambient kind of sounds. Okay, right now I've set up a patch where I'm using the Morph 4 as a Waveshaper. I'm sending a negative voltage from Select 2 to the third input on Morph 4. So since the first input gets 5 volts and that gets normaled across, we've got channels 1 and 2 then receiving positive 5 volts and channels 3 and 4 receiving negative 5 volts, and I'm sending to the Morph modulation input an audio rate source, which is the Generate 3 going through the Mix 3 as a VCA. So I'm actually using a VCA before the Morph 4 only because I'm taking 4 separate outputs from the Morph 4 into my hex mix. They're panned hard and soft left and hard and soft right, so we get kind of an array, kind of a panning going on. I don't know if you can see because of the light out here, but already we are visualizing the mix of channels A and B on top, green, and the mix of channels C and D on the bottom, which are red. So as you can see, each of these two signals is existing only positively or negatively. Still sounds cool. When I turn it up, I'm using the ornament in crime as a sequencer, and the contour one is the envelope generator for amplitude. And Generate 3 is actually sending the full output, which is a mix between fundamental, even, and odd harmonics, and that does affect the sound as well. Oh, and one more thing, I'm also using the filter 8 as a quad LFO. The 4 outputs that I'm using from filter 8 are modulating the span, which is how wide the triangle base is of the 4 channels of Morph, and of course they're being swept in audio rate. So let's hear what that sounds like. If I just bring up the level here, right? Play around with the sequencer here a little bit. Tilt the Morph one way, we get more right side heavy there. Tilt the other way, more left side heavy, right? If I change the positions individually here, you can also get quite different effects. Speed up the filter 8 LFO, just modulating the spans here. Also use different effects. The level of the Morph CV. Alright, let's play around a little bit with the mix of waveforms from Generate 3. So I'm adding a little bit of odd, a little bit of even, and inverting the fundamental, a brighter sound there. Okay, why don't we take that output of the sequencer, just sequence here on Ornament and Crime, send that to the multiple, to the link 2 here. This is a mostly Joranalogue system, because now we're gonna modulate these spans in audio rate. So I'm gonna take filter 8, make it audio rate, and stick the volt per octave output of the sequencer in there, and also to Generate 3. Oh, it's already going to Generate 3, so alright, we're all set there. So I turn up the volume again. Pretty cool. kind of randomly playing around with the knobs here. Ooh, that's nice right there. Oof, cool. And it's got this kind of stereo texture, right? Very nice. Let's play around with the sequence again a little bit. Very cool. So this is using the Morph 4 in audio rate. As a kind of stereo waveshaper. Let's go back to LFO levels here with the filter rate. It's still responding to volt per octave, which is cool. I can also play it with my Morph here. Okay, now instead of controlling the filter with volt per octave, we'll control it with vertical tilt here of my keyboard. How about we use the gate of contour 1? Cool. My finger's vertical position on the Morph keyboard. We have two Morphs going on here today. A Morph 4 from Joranalogue and Senso Morph keyboard overlay. And I have it set up as one voice MPE, which is kind of an oxymoron, but more like MME, multi-expressive monophonic. It's quite a range too, from a slowish LFO all the way to audio rate. Send some LFOs to the position inputs over here. Not level, position. There you go. Got 3 coming out of the Kermit there. Let's get a 4th one. I just need to change it here real quickly because I don't want it to be a square wave anymore. And a little bit less amplitude, and here we go. And now we got even more stereo morphing going on here. Very cool. Super slow. See what happens. It's quite a drone. I'm still controlling filter rate, speed with the morph here. I'm moving my finger up or down on any key. Very cool. You can actually put the positions all center now, because they're being modulated by separate LFOs. Except for the first one, I had to use that one as a clock. Trigger the contour 1. These LFOs go a little faster. Okay, sequence. Nice 5-note sequence there. Not to boucle. Nice. Slower. So there you have it. That's it for today's golden hour. I'll be back tomorrow recording some more example patches with the Morph 4. See you soon.